This week, we are looking at the tool or practice of fasting. Though Jesus specifically called us to this practice, he said when we fast, on the assumption that that's what people do, it remains key to the spiritual life and formation of committed Christians for many centuries, but now has, to some extent, taken the back seat. A lot of us don't feel or see the need to incorporate it into our regular walk with Jesus. So tonight we're asking, why do it? I'd say that it acknowledges the role and the significance of our bodies and how they should glorify God. Of all the tools or practices, it's the one that involves our body as much as our spirit. Dallas Willard, who I mentioned last week, says that fasting confirms our utter dependence upon God by finding in him a source of sustenance beyond food. Fasting unto our Lord, he says, is therefore feasting on him and on doing his will. He says that if we do it regularly, it will give us a clear and constant sense of our resources in God, and that will help us endure deprivations of all kinds. It teaches self-control and therefore moderation and restraint with regard to all our fundamental drives. Since food has the pervasive place it does in our lives, the effect of fasting will be diffused throughout our personality. There are other aspects and benefits to fasting that I'm sure Tim will talk about and may come up over the course of the evening. So over to you, Tim, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, everybody. That's the talk done, so we'll just go straight to questions. Nice to see you all. I know quite a few of you here. Last time I was here, I was doing the men's breakfast, so I'm just going to do the introduction that I did there, which is basically tell you how everybody's doing. You know, our family. If you remember Jake, the hairy one there, thankfully he's had a shave and a haircut since. He's now married to Hannah. He's a youth minister in North London now. Ben here, he is just about to start in September as a trainee detective in the Met. And if you know Ben, I wouldn't trust him with a wheelbarrow, let alone a trench. It is terrifying, you're right, Tal. Crumbs, no, that's gone back one. Dan here, he's engaged to Mim, and he's claimed New Zealand citizenship, so we've abandoned him. And he is in New Zealand as we speak. He's about to come back with Mim for her sister's wedding. And they may go back to New Zealand, they're not sure, but if you remember Dan, he doesn't make decisions quick, so we'll probably find out the day before he does something. And then we have Jazz here, who is currently just finishing her first year studying classics at Liverpool, so she now officially knows everything, as opposed to just a teenage girl who knows everything. And then, of course, we've got Nikki here, who is now the Director of Ordnance, works with the Bishop of London, and she's very busy at the minute organising the ordination of, I think it's 60 people at St Paul's Cathedral in about 2 months' time. And yes, I've just literally 2 weeks ago handed in my doctorate. It's all done and dusted, and I'm really happy. And I graduate and wear a silly hat. Thank you very much. If you have trouble sleeping, I can come and talk to you about priesthood. And I can really dull. I really can. But apparently that's the aim of doing a doctorate, being dull. So there we go, that's how we are. We're all well, we're all good and busy with life. So, fasting. Fasting. Forgot what it sorry. We're here to look at fasting. As already pointed out, there's a key bit. I'm just going to go through a few things, a few principles, a few guidelines on fasting. It is not an exhaustive list. You've already mentioned, it's already been mentioned, a Dallas Willard book, can't remember the title, but somebody will shout it out.
Celebration of the Discipline.
There we go. And then there's various books on fasting and stuff like that, which will show the point of it. And as quite rightly also pointed out, it is not something that is really grasped within Western Christianity as a practice in discipleship. And I think that's really sad. We, as a church in West London, we try and do once a month, we will do a 24-hour fast. We always link it with feasting. It's not a contradiction in terms. The idea is we'll fast for 24 hours, at the end of which whoever the person is in the house or the flat will produce a feast for everyone. And that is a real challenge, cooking whilst fasting and not being able to taste the gravy or what you're doing. So it could be like potluck, it could be eating anything. But we try and do that once a month. So we're here to look at, I'm just going to look at a few things. So first off, as again quite rightly pointed out in Matthew 6, it is mandated, it is directed, Matthew 6:16, when you fast. It's not seen as an option, it's not taught as an option. The same with giving to the needy, verse 2. So when you give to the needy. The same with verse 5 with prayer, and when you pray. There's almost a kind of this triune directive that actually there's an expectation. It's just there's a way of doing it where you don't lord it over with people. You don't make a big song and dance about it. The mandate is clear that when you fast, if you want to go drill down a bit and look at the Greek for when, it is hotan, which means when. There's nothing more technical than that. It is clear, it is there, it is set out as something that is expected to happen. The thing is, as we look at, there's also a mandate, I think there's a clear strategy for different aspects of it. Again, I'm not going to be giving an exhaustive list on this, but there's particular strategy to engage fasting as a community as opposed to individuals. And we're going to look at actually health, because it's become really quite trendy. So, fasting. When I was prepping this, we've done Matthew 6, I've just jumped on that. When I was prepping this, I thought I had a picture for you guys. And the picture is of a toolbox. Not an average toolbox, but a brand spanking new toolbox that's got all the little widgets all lined up. It's a type of toolbox there, that all lined up inside. And if you imagine in our house, that line would not be in that order after an hour of being in our house. Okay? And I'm sure it's the same in every other household in Britain. This drawer won't be able to close after the first week because somebody's put a spanner in and not put it in at the correct angle. So you have to keep jamming it close. So the things, it just won't stay like that. But I do think that is how, to use the title of this course that you're doing on Toolkit, that is how a lot of our disciplines as Christians remain. A really nice, spanky toolbox. And the reality is, in the other half of the picture I had, was actually, and it's not a great picture, it's just an old, dusty toolbox. And all the tools are really used, and the varnish has been rubbed off on it. And some bits are held on with gaffer tape. And actually there's bits of tools in this toolbox that nobody knows what the heck they are, because they might be like 3 little chopsticks sellotaped together with a bit of rubber on the end. But that does this job in the house. And I think this is a picture where we should be with our tools, with our toolkit in Christianity. The idea that giving to the poor, we end up with just this wonderful, looks great, but not giving to the poor, it should be looking like that. It should be something that when we do it. Our prayer lives, sadly, it's the kind of prayers we do on a kind of, it almost sounds like a kind of, do you remember Snoopy cartoons? That table over there won't remember them. But then the Snoopy cartoons, the teachers, when they do it in the classroom, and the teacher's voices, and it feels like we're in prayer meetings sometimes, where actually they couldn't be saying anything because you're not listening. Okay? I have a friend who, he's just finished a doctorate with me, a guy called Pete, American guy, wonderful guy. And the most amazing prayer I've ever met. And I was in a prayer meeting with him, it was about 4 of us, and he started praying, and I kid you not, I started feeling comfortable about how long this prayer was going on. So I had a nifty look at my watch. Right, I had a mental note. How long from this point? So imagine somebody praying. At what point? How long have they been praying before you start thinking, that's long? That's when I started timing it. 17 minutes later, he stops praying. It's incredible. But sadly, we've got into this practice with prayer, with fasting, and with giving. If you look at it, you could end up with a kind of, almost like a kind of top 3 of those disciplines. And actually, relatively speaking, giving, we're quite good at giving, really, aren't we? Prayer's probably number 2, but 3, fasting. It probably doesn't even get a look in. So let's look. We've looked at the mandate. Let's look at the strategy. Turn to your Bibles. Ezra, fantastic book of the Bible. I think these are some of the references that are in your booklet. So look at you all turning your Bibles on. Great. And don't, yes, no, I'm not saying that. I have an edit button in my head. I've just edited something out. Ezra chapter 8. This is a strategy. There are reasons for doing fasting. If you've got an NIV, it's page 480. Ezra 8, chapter 8. So Ezra 8, chapter 8, you read it. Ezra 8, verse 21. There, by the Ahava Canal, I proclaimed a fast, so that we might humble ourselves before God and ask him for a safe journey for us and our children with all our possessions. I was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to protect us from enemies on the road, because we had told the king, the gracious hand of God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and he answered our prayer. So, verse 21, the strategy of fasting is about humbling ourselves. Secondly, verse 21 and 23, it's about asking and petitioning. It's about asking and petitioning God. So humbling ourselves and asking and petitioning. There's a wider story going on. We're going to look at another story in the Bible in a bit about when you should pray, how you should pray. But one of the things that we found is that praying at a time of desperation or of need is a good point to call people to pray and to fast. Where we are in West London, don't believe all the hype, not everyone carries a knife, but crime is quite an issue. We run a food bank, we run a food bank. It's open from 12 o'clock on Friday, closes at 4 o'clock. We have people queuing from before 8 o'clock in the morning. We run a camp debt centre where we are. We could employ our camp manager full time and he still wouldn't be able to scratch the surface of debt. Now, I've not been in Egham for 8 years. I don't know what the issues are and the powers that are existing around, but where we are, debt, violence, food hunger is a massive issue we need to pray and to fast into. The irony. We're fasting about people struggling for food. This is what we should be doing as Christians. We should be praying against the principalities and powers of our day that are in existence. Now, don't spiritualize that phrase and praying against the spirituality and the powers and get all kind of into kind of what spirituality thing. Principalities and powers about what is in existence here on earth that is not of God. What is not of God in Egham that you guys need to go, actually we need to pray and fast into that. We've been praying and fasting into the whole idea of debt and violence in our area, and it still is there. It doesn't mean to say we've failed, it doesn't mean to say we should stop, we should do it more. What are the issues? What is the strategy of fasting that you should humble yourselves and ask and petition God about here in Egham? Second one, Isaiah 58. Oh, I'm totally lost. Isaiah 58, here we go. Isaiah 58, begin to read at verse 6. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here I am. It's interesting, again, that's set into a context. You read the first bit of that chapter. It goes on about actually fasting, when actually all you tend to do is exploit people. You say you fast and you pray, but you end up exploiting people. You end up quarrelling. You end up fighting. You end up causing strife for each other. And then verse 6 kicks in. But this is what fasting is all about. It's about speaking into and against injustice, the oppressive yokes, to set people free, to feed the hungry. This isn't a type of fasting where you're almost walking a line between the Jesus saying, don't fast like they do, look at them, everybody knows they're fasting, and they make a big song and dance about it. And the other end, you need to be quiet, you need to be submissive, no one needs to know that you're doing it. But at the same time, where you are and where you serve out your discipleship, there's a call to do as well as to sit back and pray and fast. Isaiah 58 is great. Again, if you read that again and reflect on it, you get almost exact, not exactly, you get similar echoes of the reading in Luke 4, where Jesus stands in Nazareth and reads Isaiah 61. Let the oppressed go free, sight to the blind. You get these kingdom values of what Jesus and ministry and our ministry should be all about. Let's jump to one more verse. Nehemiah. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had been exiled, that survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. Then he said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been ruined with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept for some days. I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then you get the famous bit where he talks into I was the cupbearer to the king, and I'm going to take this opportunity. But his first reaction to hearing what was going on back in Judah and Jerusalem was prayer and fasting. He was deeply moved and upset. And I think part of that fasting strategy is letting our culture and environment upset us. Is seeing people, the thousands of students with all the new, well, they're probably not new to you, but I drove past all those new flats for students that are out there that are spending 3 years here, and you're wanting them to hear the gospel. You're wanting them to be fed. You're wanting them to be loved. You're wanting them to be supported. Get a corporate church heart for your community. Let God decide the rest. That's Nehemiah. That's our strategy in fasting. And finally, you get everybody's into fasting nowadays. One of the things I've been in chaplaincy at a few different festivals, and one of the festivals we did last summer was to put it bluntly, an alternative lifestyle festival. And it was mad. But one of the things was they did. There was yoga tents. And that was the stuff I could tell you about. All right. And then there was tents about learning how to fast. And they had that. What's his name? Wim Hof. Anybody heard of him? Not heard of Wim Hof. Get on Netflix tonight and watch it. He's mad. He does all the jumping in frozen lakes stuff. And he was there. And they were jumping in lakes and everything. But one of the things they were talking about was fasting. And actually the spiritual health of fasting. It was a secular version of it, but it was there. And if you go on apps now, it's like kind of all the different apps can tell you about. You've got the fasting, keto diet, 800, intermittent fasting, intermittent fasting logbook, literally thousands of different apps and books that are around to do this. There are health benefits for it. But if you're going to do it, corporately or individually, talk to someone who knows about things. Talk to your doctor. If you've got some things in your body, maybe kind of a bit body dysmorphic, or maybe you struggle with eating and you've had that in your past somewhere, go and talk to your doctor before you think about doing it. Okay? Pure and simple. Talk to somebody who knows about these things. How could I do it? And how, if I could do it, how can I do it healthily for me in my body? Okay? Secondly, you've got the health aspect. Okay, yes. The other bit I want to talk about, there's fasting, and actually one of the things that we do is, it won't be a complete fast, but what we say is you can drink water, or you can do kind of cucumber in it kind of thing. But the water is everything you do it 24 hours, okay? Now, one of the things, our church is fed up with me barking on about it, but we did a sermon series just before lockdown on Leviticus. We did 12 weeks in Leviticus. It's a great book, seriously misunderstood. And one of the things they talk about in Leviticus, when they talk about all the different sacrifices, they talk about the cost of the sacrifice. Now, the cost is always done in such a way that everybody can access the sacrificial system. So if you're going to do a thank offering, the expectation is that if you can afford it, you do a big cow. But if you can't afford a cow, you still need to thank. So you can do a sheep. But if you can't afford a sheep, you can use a pigeon or a duck, but it's got to be a good one. The reality being there, if you're really wealthy, it's going to cost you. If you're not that wealthy, it's going to cost you because it's a sheep, not a cow. But if you've got no money, you can go and catch a decent bird and use that as a thank offering. There's effort and there's cost involved. When they talk about Passover in Exodus, you read kind of some of the ancient kind of commentaries around it, they talk about how they used to do the Passover. And one of the things they used to do, one of the suggestions is that you used to take the lamb that was going to be used for the sacrifice, and you'd have the lamb in the house for the weeks running up to Passover. Now, some of you may have jumped ahead on this, but the cost wasn't just for the parents whose, wait a minute, that's lost income, but it's to the kids as well. Because this little baby lamb, Boris, has been living with them for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, Passover, that's the sacrifice the family's given. The kids' cost of that is quite a lot. So there is a cost to it. There is a cost to fasting. Now, we've only met a couple of people who try and kind of get around it a little bit, but the reality is that there has to be a cost involved. Now, that's why we kind of put the fasting on our thing, is that actually, if you don't eat for 3 meals, quite soon you save money, especially from our neck of the woods, in Surrey and in London. You've saved money. That's not really costing you, is it? That's why we tag on the fasting bit at the end. And so actually the expectation and the idea is that it's a good, decent celebration meal. Whether you're in a flat or whether you're in your house. We used to do this when the kids were at home. I always did we still do on the Monday. And I'd always do a Sunday lunch on a Monday. Because we'd always be in church and doing all sorts and never had time to do it. So we'd always have a Sunday lunch, and like I say, making gravy when you're fasting, it's a real test. But actually, the celebration, that's the fun. You're not, the cost is in the feasting. Or actually, you save the money and you give it to someone. Okay? Safe, you already mentioned that about consult a doctor. If in any way you've got any, whether it's diabetes or whatever, talk to your doctor before doing it. Set clear objectives. I've just said, we give a few examples there. A situation where they're in trouble, where you want to do it for your community, where actually you want to seek God. Okay, maybe you're thinking, I want a real big change. I'm going to look for a decent job, a different job, I'm not quite sure what to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pray and fast for 4 Mondays in a month. My objective being, I am going to lean into God to try and find out what God is calling me to for my next season. You've set the objective. It might be a corporate one. We need to look for a new vision as to what's going on in Egham and how you guys are going to evangelise the whole of Egham. Okay? Next, I don't know, the whole term, do it on a Mondays. The objective being clarity in that. You set the objective, the clear objective on it, you will always win. Because even if you don't find out what your next job is on the call, you've leaned into what God might have in store for you. You've pushed doors, you've asked people, you've prayed, and you've fasted. I've gone on far too long. And final one, accountable. Again, invariably it's blokes, which is really interesting. Blokes all fine. Oh, I got too busy. Oh, I couldn't do it. I've got this. Oh, God, I can't do it. I've got to do that. And they'll always find a way around it. If you're going to do it, hold yourself accountable to it. Blokes will hold blokes accountable. It's just maybe a sexist thing to say, but what we have found is that if women tend focus to do it, they'll do it. Blokes will try and find a way around it. So hold yourself accountable to it with someone who'll go, did you do it? And if you didn't, why not? That's it. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Tim. Would you like to take a seat? That was really, really helpful. Thank you very much. I always have a list of things that I would love to kind of include and to mention. Thank you very much. Something that Richard Moore, who was with us last week, mentioned was also, he didn't call it such, but the concept of digital fasting, which is quite a big thing. It's different, but it's another way of focusing the mind and of taking out one of the big distractions of life and allowing us to focus better on God. So I always think if for any reason you have got medical issues or what have you that mean that maybe fasting from food is a bit tricky, then that's another option, which I'm sure you've all already thought of or explored, but just to point it out. We have our 3 questions for you. The first one is, for someone who isn't familiar with or struggles with fasting, where would you start? You've obviously talked about the 24-hour fast that you do at church. What's a good place to start?
Shorten the time. Shorten the time, or do something, as I already said, like a digital fast. I'd probably say with a digital fast, I'd probably put into there something that costs as well. But it's a digital fast is a good one, and especially when you're kind of permanently doing this. And we were at Nikki and I. Where were we? We were at some restaurant last week, and there was a couple. They didn't say a word the whole time we were eating. Just kept doing this, just eating and picking up on them. And so that would be a good one. So start maybe something like that, or just shorten it and do a kind of sundown to sun up. So just do it overnight, but obviously that's going to be harder in the winter. So you do it from kind of, you don't eat tea time, but you eat breakfast, and go to a nice place for breakfast. So there are ways of shortening it. Start short, or do something more practical.
Thanks, and I love what you were saying about feasting as well, being a part of the process, because I go on that, but we're so good at feasting anyway. We make it a bit of a daily thing, really, in the Western world, and you appreciate what it is that you're eating so much more.
Oh, totally. We again, one of the things we had to have a bit of a learning curve on with us is that if we all said, how are we at hospitality, we'd all be going, oh yes, we're good at hospitality. But are we good at biblical hospitality? Because biblical hospitality is feeding people who you don't know. And I think as Christians we're really good at feeding mates and maybe the slightly old relative who we have to bring along. But we're not good at just feeding, a complete stranger. And actually part of that feast may become someone you've met on that, when you've gone out for your fast, bring them in and share that feast. I mean, when push comes to shove, if you look at Alpha, all Alpha is just teaching people to be hospitable and to share the gospel. And it's tragic that we've got to a point in Western Christianity that we need a 10-week course to teach us how to be hospitable and to explain the gospel. Or actually, no, we urge somebody else to do that. We are, what's his name, Nicky Gumbel, talking about Quentin and all these posh friends.
Thank you. Yeah, hospitality is a practice, it's a tool, it's something I haven't put in the book, but it is key, and it's very much modelled by Jesus, so thank you for pointing that out. So if anybody wants to go deeper with fasting, obviously they can increase their time, but yeah, what tips would you have in terms of focus, etc.?
Don't do it on your own, do it at least with 2 or 3 people. Yes, set the objective as part of it, and if you're even slightly worried about the effect of fasting on your body, talk to a doctor. And I think you can't go wrong if you're going to do it in community, hold each other accountable to it, set an objective, talk to a doctor if you need to.
Thank you. And you've mentioned how, again, with fasting, we are looking outward as well. So we're maybe, as per the Isaiah verse, as per what Jesus was saying in Luke, our focus is on helping other people and righting wrongs and doing what we should be doing as Christians. So with that in mind, what change would you hope to see in our church and community as a result of us practicing this?
Well, yeah, you're right. I think when churches take discipleship seriously, churches will inherently start looking outwards more. And I think that our natural human behaviour when we join a group is to always protect the group and look in and not look out. And I think if you start, whether it's fasting, whether it's praying, whether it's taking God seriously and discipleship seriously, that group will start looking out. So that the fruit of that would be looking outwards, would people coming to church who are clearly not Christians, but starting on a journey. I mean, I've just been talking with Conrad and Debbie about how COVID has affected you guys here, and it's, did you say how much? What was the percentage you said you reckoned that had dropped off St John's over COVID? About 10%, something like that. The national average is 30% in churches. 30% have left church through COVID. Ours is probably 35, maybe just under 40% of that. What's really interesting for us is that since COVID, we're smaller, we're more culturally representative of where we are. There's less white people. We've got a poorer demographic, and mental health is probably one of the main issues in our church. And I think that to me that isn't a problem. To me that is a church working. We're smaller. We've not got as much money, but we're more culturally diverse, struggling with mental health issues. And whereas actually prior to that, if we had people turn up who were homeless, they'd all sit in the same corner, and the sad reality is some members of our church refer to that as character corner, but that's turned around now, and I think that's what you've got to look for is a change of a group that goes from inward looking. Let's face it, if you tithe, we're a funny little odd golf club with tithing membership. And actually, once we start looking out, that changes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is one of the things that with fasting it can so easily be like the intermittent fasts or the purely health-based, and in seeking to look outward and to think, well, goodness, I'm feeling so hungry and I've only been doing this by choice. with good reason. And there are a lot of people who actually are just feeling this way because it's unavoidable. And bearing that in mind and seeking to be outward looking, I think is really important in fasting.
Oh, totally. I mean, we're finding two things. The guys who were at the breakfast will know more about this, but the chaplaincy stuff I've been doing last year at 3 big festivals, and actually just 3 weeks ago, Nikki and I were on holiday in Tunisia. The brief was do nothing, and we seriously didn't leave the hotel. Those of you who are into kind of holidays looking at culture, no, did none. And I read books, and I was sat on a sun lounger. I couldn't have looked more like I didn't want to talk to anybody. Hat on, book, headphones, and a guy came over from Macclesfield, not just over to me from Macclesfield, he was in the hotel. And he came over, and I had an Iron Maiden t-shirt on. And he came and he goes, I love Iron Maiden. And he talked at me for about half an hour. And Nicky's on this sun lounger, on this sun lounger. And he says, so what do you do then? I'm a vicar. And he kind of went, oh, really? Yeah. So he turned to Nicky. So what do you do then? I'm a vicar as well. Really? And so we ended up talking, and he brought his, we thought, wife, friend, over, and we ended up having this week-long conversation, this week-long conversation about faith and about Jesus Christ and the church, and the end of which he said to me and Nikki on the last day, he said, look, you've created, he said, we never thought we'd bump into someone who'd be a vicar here. He said, but you managed to talk with us and you created a safe space for us just to laugh and find out about Christianity. And that, to me, I don't think that is odd. Don't listen to all these kind of flag wavers in church community who say it's really hard to engage with people on Christianity and talk about your faith. They're out there. They want to talk about it. They haven't got the language to talk about it. Oh, you don't go out there. Anybody wants to talk about Jesus? I can tell you about Jesus. They haven't got that language, but they're interested in faith. They're interested in their journey and where they've been and how they're doing it. And they want to know more. And I don't know. Are they going to become Christians? I don't know. But they're now Facebook friends. And they're going back home to try and find a church, having never been to a church in their life. And I think we have to look at things like this toolkit. It has to be the rusty one. We have to start looking out. If it isn't happening, then you've got to ask questions of yourself, well, what am I doing wrong? It's not God's fault. Our theology is that God's out there already working. We've just got to find out where and join in. Sorry.
No, and thank you for plugging another practice of being interruptible.
Oh.
That's major interruptibility, a whole week's worth. Thank you. Well, I'm sure you'll all join me in thanking Tim for coming and speaking to us.